It was a Friday night, one of those rainy nights that turned the city streets into dark, shining mirrors. Sarah, a 20-something college student, was stuck on campus after a long group meeting. Her phone announced a low battery, and the streetlight reflected off the puddles of water around her as she hurriedly opened the Uber app. The cold wind whipped the hood of her coat as she typed in her destination, her small house on the outskirts of town. She needed to get home as quickly as possible to avoid getting even more soaked. Within minutes, the app informed you that your driver was on his way. She looked at the map and saw a black car icon approaching. Momentary relief washed over her as she knew she would be in a comfortable vehicle soon. When the black car parked next to her, Sarah quickly opened the back door and got in. The driver, a middle-aged man with a gray beard and sharp eyes, waved with a gentle smile in the rearview mirror. He had a serious expression, but his eyes seemed warm. "Good evening," he greeted, and Sarah responded politely as she closed the door behind her. The car was warm and cozy, a welcome relief from the rain and cold outside. She mentally thanked her for her decision to use Uber that night. "Where can I take you?" asked the driver, looking at her in the rearview mirror. His accent was foreign, but his voice was calm and reassuring. Sarah gave him her home address and looked out the window as the car started to move. The city was quiet, lit only by the yellow light of street lamps and the headlights of other cars. The rain continued to fall, turning the world outside into a distorted blur. The trip started peacefully, with Sarah watching the raindrops running down the window. She settled into the back seat, feeling relieved to be on her way home after a long week of classes and work. However, something started to bother her. The driver, despite being polite, remained strangely silent. He didn't ask about her day, like most drivers did, to ease the discomfort of the trip. He just stared at the road, his gaze fixed and determined. The silence in the car's cabin began to bother Sarah, making her aware that something was wrong. She decided to break the ice and ask a question. "How's the night going for you, driver?" He took a moment to respond, and when he did, his voice was serious and measured. Rainy nights are different. They reveal more than people can see. The response sent shivers down Sarah's spine, but she decided that maybe he just liked to wax poetic. However, the silence that followed was more uncomfortable than the previous one. The road took them out of the city center, and lights became scarce. Sarah noticed that they weren't following the typical route she used to get home. The car was moving away from the urban area, entering a remote and dark area. Uneasy, Sarah frowned and asked driver, "Are you going the right way?" "This isn't the route I usually take." The driver did not respond immediately, his expression remaining unchanged. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and expressionless. "We're going where we need to go." "Don't worry." The answer did not reassure her. The road ahead was shrouded in darkness, with only the car's headlights to light the way. Sarah began to feel a growing uneasiness. She looked on her cell phone to check the route on the Uber app, but realized with horror that her phone had no signal. The silence in the car became deafening, and the whispers of the rain outside seemed like eerie whispers from a nightmare. Sarah was trapped in that unfamiliar vehicle, at the mercy of a silent driver and a mysterious path. Sarah's discomfort grew as the car continued to move away from the city and into a more remote area. She looked at the map on the Uber app and noticed that the route drawn by the driver was completely different from the one she was used to following. The driver didn't seem willing to answer Sarah's questions, and the feeling of strangeness increased. She began to weigh her options, realizing there weren't many. With her cell phone without signal, she was out of contact with the outside world. As I tried to muster the courage to take action, a disturbing sound began to echo through the car. It was a soft murmur, a distorted, unintelligible whisper that seemed to come from the vehicle's sound system. The hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stood up as she realized the whisper was gaining intensity. "What is this?" she asked, trying to remain calm, but her voice was shaky. The driver didn't respond, but the look in the rearview mirror seemed different. His once warm eyes now seemed empty, as if they belonged to someone else. He continued driving with the same serious expression, as if he wasn't aware of the disturbing whisper. The whispers on the sound system became louder, almost deafening. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest and a growing sense of paranoia. She looked at the driver and pleaded, "Please stop the car and let me out. I don't want to continue this trip." The driver finally responded, but his voice was filled with a dark tone that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "We can't stop now. There's something that needs to be done." Sarah felt a lump in her throat, but she knew she couldn't let the situation get out of control. She began frantically searching for her cell phone, hoping to find reception. However, no matter how many times she tried, the phone remained stubbornly without signal. The road ahead was a narrow, deserted strip, with the darkness of the night and the rain making everything even more ominous. The whispers in the sound system seemed to come to life, as if the distorted words were whispering directly into his ears. Sarah was on the verge of panic when the driver made an unexpected maneuver, turning onto a dark, deserted dirt road. The sudden movement caused her to be thrown to the side, and she gripped the seat tightly. She could no longer contain her anxiety. "What are you doing? Please let me out," she shouted, her words echoing inside the car. The driver continued driving, his face impassive. He no longer seemed like the kind man who'd greeted her at the beginning of the trip. The whispers in the sound system reached a crescendo, filling the interior of the car with a terrifying cacophony of distorted voices. A feeling of despair took over Sarah. She realized she was in danger, in a terrifying situation from which she could not escape. Her options were running out, and she knew she needed to take drastic measures to survive. With her heart racing and her hands shaking, Sarah began frantically searching for something she could use to defend herself. The inside of the car was dark, but his fingers found a bottle of water in the cup holder. She grabbed it with determination, realizing that this was her only chance to fight whatever was happening. Now armed with the breakable bottle, Sarah took a deep breath and prepared herself for the imminent confrontation. She knew she was about to enter into a fight for her life as the car continued to travel down the dark and deserted road, taking her further away from the safety she so longed for. With the breakable water bottle in her hands, Sarah was determined to face the unknown that surrounded her. The cacophony of distorted whispers continued to reverberate inside the car, creating a suffocating and disturbing atmosphere. As Sarah kept the bottle ready to defend herself, the driver finally broke the silence that had enveloped him since the beginning of the trip. He said, "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah." The driver's voice was filled with gravity and a strange familiarity. Sarah blinked, trying to understand the meaning behind those words. What did he mean by that? She didn't know him. At that moment, something sinister happened. The back seat of the car moved, as if someone was emerging from the shadows. A figure stood up, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The figure was dressed in a hood, which obscured most of its face, leaving only its eyes visible. The passenger's eyes were dark and empty, lifeless. They seemed to merge with the darkness of the hood. The passenger reached out his hand towards Sarah, and she could see that his fingers were covered in some slimy substance, as if they had touched something nefarious. "What is this? Who are you?" Sarah exclaimed, moving as far back as possible into the back seat of the car. The passenger continued reaching out his hand toward her, as if he wanted to touch Sarah. His lips moved, but only an unintelligible whisper escaped them. It was the same distorted whisper that filled the interior of the car, echoing in Sarah's mind. She realized she was in imminent danger, surrounded by menacing strangers in a vehicle that seemed to be a portal to darkness. There was no longer any way to deny that something terrible was happening. Sarah acted on instinct. With the breakable water bottle in her hands, she made a quick and violent movement, attacking the sinister passenger. The bottle collided with the hood, causing the passenger to recoil with a muffled scream. A slimy substance ran down the hood, revealing a pale, writhing figure beneath. The driver, surprised by Sarah's action, finally unlocked the car doors. She wasted no time and, with the bottle still in hand, jumped out of the moving vehicle. She rolled across the wet asphalt and got up, running as fast as she could in the opposite direction of the car. The distorted whispers still haunted her, echoing in her mind. She didn't look back, but the last thing she saw was the black car disappearing into the darkness of the night. She was alone on the deserted road, her heart racing and her breathing labored. The feeling of relief at being free was quickly replaced by the horror of what she had witnessed. Who were the driver and passenger? What was going on in that car? She had no answers, but she knew that the night had changed her life irrevocably. Sarah continued running until she found a gas station on the road, where she called for help. The police were called, and she reported her terrifying experience. However, when authorities arrived at the location where the car had left her, it had disappeared without a trace. There were no records of the injured driver or passenger. The terrifying experience became a story Sarah would share with others, a warning about the dangers that could lurk behind a ride-hailing app. The memory of that night would haunt their nightmares forever, an experience that would turn into a dark and disturbing creepypasta, reminding everyone that, on the dark roads of the night, evil can lurk at any moment. Sarah was safe now, at the gas station, but the feeling of fear and paranoia that the Uber experience had left her with persisted. She told the police everything that had happened, but the lack of clues about the black car and its occupants left her frustrated. As the minutes turned into hours, Sarah tried to make sense of what she had witnessed. The distorted whispers still resonated in her mind, and the sinister figure of the passenger with empty eyes haunted her. What did those whispers mean? Why were they there? As the night wore on, police continued to investigate, but the mystery only seemed to grow. The black car was not registered in any database, and there were no clues about the driver or passenger. Sarah found herself tormented by the desire to discover the truth behind those terrifying events. She decided to start her own investigation, gathering information about where the car had left her and the area the driver had taken her to. While reading local news and reports, she came across a series of unexplained incidents near that road. Locals spoke of urban legends and horror stories about a road that led to some unknown place, a place where strange things happened. Reports of mysterious lights, unexplained disappearances, and disturbing whispers filled local stories. Sarah was determined to find out what was going on. She returned to the scene of the race and began exploring the area. In daylight, the road looked scary in a completely different way. The silence was oppressive, and the dark trees that lined the road created a feeling of isolation and fear. While investigating, Sarah discovered a dirt road that branched off from the main road. She decided to follow it, following an inexplicable intuition. The dirt road was narrow and wound through the dark forest, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was heading towards something ominous. As she walked along the road, she came to a clearing in the forest. There, she saw something that left her paralyzed with horror. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, and within that circle, something was written in an ancient and strange language. Sarah took a photo with her cell phone, deciding to investigate the meaning of the inscription later. When he was preparing to leave the place, he noticed an object buried under some leaves. She dug it up and was horrified to discover it was a torn photograph. In the photo, there was a human figure with a hood, empty eyes, and a sinister smile on his face. It was the sinister passenger she had encountered that terrifying night. The discovery of the torn photograph only intensified his suspicions that something supernatural and evil was occurring in that area. Determined to solve the mystery, Sarah continued her investigation. She researched the ancient language of the inscription and discovered that it was a ritualistic language used in dark ceremonies. She was getting closer to the truth, but she was also getting closer to danger. Through her research, she found references to an ancient cult that performed rituals in that area, invoking supernatural entities and practicing black magic. The circle of stones and the inscription were part of the dark rituals performed there. Sarah was determined to stop the cult from continuing its nefarious activity and to seal off the area. She gathered information on how to stop the rituals and what was needed to protect the area from future evil events. In the darkness of the night, she returned to the site, armed with incense, holy water, and courage. She recited words of protection and performed a ritual to seal the circle of stones. As midnight approached, Sarah felt a dark presence around her, as if evil entities were trying to stop her. However, Sarah remained steadfast in her determination to protect those who might be drawn to the location. The ritual was completed successfully, and a sense of relief washed over her. She knew she had done what was necessary to stop the dark forces from prevailing. With the area sealed, Sarah returned home, knowing she had faced evil and triumphed. She would never forget the terrifying night in the Uber, but now she also carried hope that her act of courage could prevent others from facing the horror she had witnessed. The dark experience turned into a story she would share with the world, warning of the dangers that could lurk on the dark roads and in the mysterious forests. She had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, determined to fight the horror and protect those who dared to explore the darkness of the night.